The Central African Republic President Faustin-Archange Touadéra cast his ballot today as the chronically unstable country holds national elections amid ongoing security challenges. The 68-year-old mathematician oversaw a constitutional referendum in 2023 that scrapped the presidential term limit. It drew an outcry from his critics who accused him of seeking to rule for life. Touadéra voted at a polling station in Bangui and expressed satisfaction with the voter turnout. He first came to power in 2016 and won a second term in 2020 in an election marred by violence and low turnout in opposition-held areas. One of the opposition candidates, Anicet Georges Dologule, dismissed calls to boycott the election, arguing that abstention would only prolong the rule of Touadéra and worsen hardships for millions of Central Africans living in poverty. Dologule told the reporters that the election represented a decisive choice for the country's next 7 years, insisting that participation rather than boycott was the only way to restore political and economic normalcy. All right, and for more on this, we are now joined by international relations expert and former ambassador Dr Kingsley Makhubela to discuss two important issues, and that being the elections being held in Guinea as well as the Central African Republic. And Mr. Makhubela, thank you so much for your time, sir, this evening here on SABC News. I mean, let's start off here. We know that there are elections being held in two countries, that being Guinea as well as the Central African Republic. Maybe let's start off with Guinea and looking at, since 2021 and following that coup, what are your expectations when it comes to the outcomes of these elections?
Mbali, good evening. With respect to Guinea-Conakry, the current military leader is likely to win the elections. You have 8 presidential candidates who are contesting elections, so the opposition is very much fragmented. So he's likely to win the elections. We are expecting the results to come up in the next 48 to 72 hours. So these are preliminary results that will come out. But indications are that Mamadi would win the outright majority on this. But Guinea, Mali, it's quite strategic. As it goes to the elections, there are a lot of international role players that are looking at it, mainly from two perspectives. One, Guinea possesses the world's largest bauxite, and it has recently discovered iron ore that actually surpasses South Africa. So it becomes a very contested in terms of the international attention. So we'll see how the election goes.
And Dr. Makhubela, I mean, just also looking at the minerals that the country boasts, it's also a country that is marred with a lot of poverty. What do these elections then mean for the people of Guinea?
Well, the military has always been advocating that corruption that happened during the previous civilian rule was the reason that really triggered the military takeover. So they gave themselves a transitional period of 7 years to return to democracy, and they've stuck to their promise so far. But this is a country that is very much well endowed in terms of mineral resources. The problem has been the mismanagement of the country. And I think the military, in liaison with Burkina Faso and other military governments in West Africa, they've consolidated this. What we are waiting to see, Mbali, is how are they going to pull their resources together to try to use that as bargaining? Because if you look at in Niger, Niger has large deposit of uranium. And it seems this alliance that they are having, Guinea, Conakry, Niger, and Burkina Faso, if they were to pull their resources together, they will have a much better bargaining chip. And we've started to see some level of development since the military takeover in these 3 countries, at least.
Let's move on now to the Central African Republic, and of course the incumbent there seeking a 3rd term in office. What do you think when you observe what is taking place in this country? What is the likelihood of the incumbent retaining that position?
Well, the the predictions are that President Touadéra will retain the majority because some of the opposition leaders have decided to boycott the elections. And of course, arguing on what you reflected earlier on, Bali, the amendment of the constitution to abolish the three-term limit for the presidential election. But the challenge that they are having now, again, they are having local government elections. In the last 40 years, there hasn't been any elections. And there's concern that the electoral authority in Central African Republic does not have the capacity to manage the election of this magnitude. There are about 2.3 registered voters, 2.3 million registered voters, a small number by any imagination. But this is a country that has been plagued by a civil war that is fought along very parochial religious basis, pitting the Seleka group and the Christian group. You know, the Seleka group is the one that really killed a large number of our soldiers a few years ago. So President Bozize, who was then the president, is still in exile. He's tried to launch a few military incursions without any success. But the biggest litmus test for this election, Bali, will be how the Electoral Commission is going to handle this election. And there are already fears that this is too much big task. They should have had the elections, the local government elections, sometimes in September, and they did not, citing challenges of financial resources and so on. But now we would see if they're going to be able to do that.
Can we see the Central African Republic, get some sort of stability, like you are posing, particularly now with these elections and the fact that we've seen that referendum in 2023 extending, the term of office for a president?
Mbali, always the election is not a silver bullet that resolves a conflict. If you look at how the conflict it's entrenched, it's basically an identity-based conflict, civil war that has been raging. And unless those issues are addressed properly, you're going to have this conflict going through different stages. You go through abeyance. At times, it will give the impression that it has reached a plateau and there's no way that it can go further than this. But because of the rich resources that it possesses, that Central African Republic possesses, again, you're going to get a lot of focus. The current opposition, Georges Dologuer, he is being accused of having dual citizenship with France, and the current government is mainly protected by the Russian military. So you're going to find this dynamics of geopolitics taking its own underhanded view in terms of these elections. And it may really distort a lot of issues moving forward, in my own view.
Dr. Makhubela, thank you so much for your thoughts on this issue.